All right, so this is a fun topic. Dating and romance as an unidentified autistic. I'm laughing because this really proved to be an adventure for me earlier in my life when arguably I didn't even really have a complete picture of who I was. And yet I was jumping into the dating scene really without any kind of understanding of what my challenges were, of thinking that all of my preconceived notions about dating and relationships were all well and good. It all seemed right to me. Where when I look back in retrospect, I'm able to identify certain things that I would do differently if I could go back. And for those of you who are dating or who are considering eventually dating, I have some insights here that maybe will be helpful. So in thinking about all the vulnerabilities really that I brought into this, here they are. Again, without a complete picture of who I was, knowing though that I was different, that I had unique challenges. Arguably, my sense of self was compromised. It would take a good length of time for me to figure things out. Certainly, the autism diagnosis helped me figure that out. But that makes dating very, very, very difficult because the person you're dating would rather see somebody who knows themselves well, who has a degree of self-confidence, at least halfway decent self-esteem. That's what people would rather possess, would rather see in other people, where I just didn't have that, and that made things challenging. I would, that should say waver between the extremes of shyness and being a little over the top. So with me, I mean, it really was the whole gamut. I was often just really bottled up about how I felt about a given individual. We'd be out on dates and I wouldn't do the body language kinds of things that if I'm interested in the person, that you lean into them, that you make eye contact, things that a lot of autistic individuals, including me, often struggle with, that that I wasn't aware of because I didn't have a diagnosis. And nonverbal communication and using and interpreting body language are critically important when you're dating. Regardless of if you're dating in the LGBTQ community, or if you're taking the cisgender heterosexual approach, regardless, it helps to be able to use nonverbal communication and body language to try to convey interest in the other person or to try to gauge whether they're interested in you. I had no clue about that. And that made dating very, very challenging. I had a fixated concept of the kind of woman who I'd want to date. And if I was out with somebody who didn't fit that ideal woman image, then things never went very far. I regret kind of having been rigid in that respect If I could do things over again, I'd be considerably more open-minded about who I'm with and whether or not this would be a worthwhile person to try to get to know better. And I would focus more than I did on inner beauty, where really as a teenaged male or a man in his 20s, I think I got a little too caught up in the physical aspect. A big part of me regrets that. I mean, granted, that does matter, but there's a whole lot more than that, really, that matters. That in retrospect, I regret having not acknowledged. Because there were women who I knew who made it clear that they were very interested in me. But I kept my distance from them because they didn't fit that image of who I felt I should pursue rigidly. And I think that got me into trouble. That's something I would definitely do different. And when you're autistic and you don't know it, it can be challenging to make friends. Any kind of social interaction has its challenges for us. You get lonely. When you're lonely, I think there's a tendency, certainly with me there was, to act a little desperate at times in terms of trying to establish a connection with who I was with. And you never ever want to show, and I'm sure that I did, probably in ways I wasn't aware of. You don't want to show that you're desperate for a relationship. If I could do things over again, I would go into dating with the attitude of whatever happens, happens. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. Maybe I could be friends with this person, or maybe it would be time to move on, and you win some and you lose some. Too obsessed with the idea of having a girlfriend versus just seeing where things go and learning and growing from the dating experience. And that, I think, comes down to when you jump into the dating world to have a sense of what are your goals. It doesn't have to be, though it could be, the goal of meeting somebody who ideally you'd want to enter into a short or long-term relationship with, or that your goal is just to get your feet wet and to date and to see how it goes and to go into it with the frame of mind of, all right, let's see what I can learn about what this entails. And the more you learn from it, you grow as a person. Maybe that can be a goal. That the goal doesn't have to be establishing a relationship, whether short or long term. And so if I could do things over again, I would modify my expectations. I had very unrealistic expectations for myself, I think, in terms of expectations around how the ideal person I'd be dating should be treating me, inflated expectations around if this doesn't result in me getting a girlfriend, then it's not worth it. To me, that's a greatly inflated, unrealistic expectation where If dating leads to something, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That would have been, I think, a more realistic expectation for me. So I brought into this, you look at this list, a good number of vulnerabilities. A lot of vulnerabilities, some but not all of which I think stemmed from the fact that I have always been autistic, but when I was dating, I had no clue. A big part of my self-identity was missing. That certainly made things challenging. Oops. So where did I go wrong? A couple of interesting stories here. All right, so I went to the University of Arizona back in the early 90s for graduate work. And I was out with a group of single people, and there was a woman, I can't recall her name because it didn't really get very far. But I got carried away with her. The two of us seemed like it could become something meaningful. And I jumped the gun because of my intense desire for a relationship. I started getting into relationship talk with her really only after being with her for the second time on a second date. Too much too soon. Again, going back to that unrealistic expectation of, well, if I'm dating somebody, it's got to turn into a relationship or it's not worth it kind of nonsense, at least in my opinion. Too much too soon. A friend of mine rightly called me out for that, saying, look, Sam, you've seen this woman twice and you're already dictating the terms of a relationship. I went overboard. Just too eager for it. And after that, I mean, for reasons that I think make really good sense to me, it just ended up fizzling. And I think probably because I was moving way, way, way too fast because of these inflated expectations. And then similar to that situation, in high school, this wasn't in college, this was in high school, where I was at summer camp and I met a girl named Danielle. I was 16 years old, she was 13. 3 years difference, but at the age that we were at, to me, this was a very big deal. Very big deal that I'm 16 years old and this girl is 13. What maybe I slightly tapped into, but didn't really, and it only occurs to me in retrospect, is that in many ways, I think she was more mature than I was, in spite of the age difference. In retrospect, she was remarkably, to me, remarkably mature for her age. If I could do it differently, I would have seen where this would have gone. It's not as if it's illegal to be 16 and dating a 13-year-old, but at least in my day, when I was growing up, this was in the 80s. It was almost unthinkable that a 16-year-old would be with a 13-year-old. That was a bit extreme, and I regret that. because in my mind, it should not have been about that. It should have been about who she was. Is she a good person? Is she smart? She was all of those things. And I distanced myself from her really because of the age difference. I kind of distanced myself from her. My emotions were mixed. On the one hand, I was dealing with the age difference issue versus actually liking who she was. She was very sweet, innocent, smart. She saw the good in me. I recognized that, and so all kinds of mixed emotions there. And another thing was, I kind of remember rationalizing this down to, well, we're two people at a summer camp. Summer camp was an 8-week sleepaway camp. I met her maybe midway through that 8-week summer camp program. I didn't think I was going to be coming back to that camp. She didn't live anywhere near me. Interestingly enough, I think at the time, if memory serves, she lived in Connecticut. And this summer camp was in Connecticut, but I was living in New Jersey at the time. So it seemed to me that I rationalized, look, the age difference, this isn't going to go anywhere anyway, because once summer camp ends, that's going to be it. And I kept my distance. I did spend some time with her, but I kept my distance at the same time. We spent time together, but we didn't really get at all close. We never kissed or really did much beyond that, again, because of these issues. And I regret that, because even if it would have only lasted for a few weeks, it could have still been a nice, memorable experience to learn from, to enjoy while it lasts. But again, preconceived notions of what a desirable dating situation is versus what isn't, I think got in the way here. So regrets there. You know, a summer camp, what might have been type of scenario. And then there's Randy. Randy was a young woman who a mutual friend matched me up with. We were going to 2 different colleges. This was a very brief kind of college fling. I went to the same college as her friend. Her friend said, look, when you go back for winter break, I think the 2 of you would make a nice fit. So I reached out to her. We went on a few dates. Here, there was some chemistry. We were able to connect, but not for long. The problem with a winter break fling is that winter break only lasted 2 weeks for me, after which we went our separate ways. And when you've only been out a few times, when you've only spent a limited amount of time together, trying to make a distance relationship work is like next to impossible. Because usually what had been the case with what I learned from my friends who are in distance relationships, and I agree with this to this day, is that if you're going to have a long distance relationship, in the beginning, you really should have a good chunk of time together, a substantial enough chunk of time that you lay the foundation for a relationship And if that relationship foundation is solid, then it seems to me that maybe you can go your separate ways and manage to quote unquote stay together. But we didn't have that. So it ended up fizzling. Not immediately after we went our separate ways, but it only took, what, if memory serves, it took just maybe a few weeks until I got the call from her saying, look, I met somebody at my school. I like him. I don't want to hurt you, but I met this person. And I ended up telling her, look, Randy, it's just not going to work out. Do what you need to do. And we agreed to be friends. That's spring break after, when we were both back in New Jersey, because that's how we were able to get together over winter break. She lived not far from me in New Jersey. We got together on a friendship basis, but that only happened once. I said to her, you know, it's nice that we're able to get together on these terms. After that one friendship get together, I ended up going back to my school. She went back to her school. And through our mutual friend, I had learned that, oddly, that she kind of looked down on my desire to be friends, where my clear recollection was that when we got together in the spring, and I told her, it's kind of nice that we can be friends. It seemed to me that she responded favorably to that. So this really didn't make any sense to me. And so the lesson here, I think, is that oftentimes in a dating scenario, people say things that they don't necessarily mean, that people might say things that they think you want to hear, as opposed to the truth about how they feel. And people are willing to lie about something or lead you to believe something that isn't really true. That I was like, what? To my friend? She said that to you? That doesn't make any sense. And so there's a lot that's challenging here in a dating relationship scenario, that not everything is going to make sense. And me and a bunch of other autistic individuals I know, we like predictability. We like honest, explicit communication. We appreciate when somebody can be literal and matter of fact with us. And how things panned out with Randy was anything but that. So that's kind of another takeaway of this dating / relationship experience that I had, if you can even really call it a relationship. We did get somewhat close while we were dating officially over winter break, but really it was not substantial enough that I think you could really call it a relationship. So dating is hard. There's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot that is not structured, that is not clear cut. People often say things that they don't mean, and that can get us into trouble. And again, I didn't have any of the understanding that I'm sharing with you now back then, because I didn't have the autism diagnosis, much less the understanding that I have today about my autism identification. to have known what to look for. That would have made dating a whole lot easier had I known then what I know now. All right, so with Becky, relative to Danielle, it's kind of a reverse scenario. With Becky, I was the one who was 3 years younger. She was a molecular biology major at Princeton University. Princeton is where I'm from. I was a senior in high school, living in Princeton as a quote unquote townie. And Becky was this beautiful, crazy intelligent, really friendly, warm senior at Princeton University. I was a senior in high school. You might think that that would be a 4-year age difference, but because I stayed back a year as a special ed student earlier in my K through 12 career, I ended up being a senior, graduating at age 19 instead of 18. So for that reason, even though we were both seniors, it was a 3-year difference rather than 4, because of the fact that back when I was a special ed student, it was customary to be kept back a year. And so 3-year difference. But here it was a situation where at that point in high school, you know, I understood the situation for what it was. Yes, I met a very nice, attractive older woman who, of course, I'm going to be attracted to, because if you met Becky, you would understand. It was impossible not to be attracted to her, just based on her inner and outer beauty. That it just couldn't be helped. But at the same time, I understood the boundaries. I understood that we were and always would be nothing more than friends. Because look, I'm a high schooler. She's a senior at Princeton University. She hadn't given me, understandably, any signs of any interest in anything. Perhaps much the way that I was towards Danielle. And so I understood it to be a friendship, with me, of course, just having feelings for her that were secret feelings. One Saturday night, the winter of my senior year, or maybe it was in the early spring, there was a party at the Princeton University Eating Club that I worked at and that she was a member of. That's how I came to know who she was. She was a member of the club, and I was a high school employee there working in the kitchen, pot washing, dishwashing, being a busboy, that kind of work. That's how I met her. I would occasionally go to the college parties that happened at this club, because heck, what high schooler wouldn't want to be partying with college students at Princeton University, you know, on an occasional Saturday night. And that's when something truly extraordinary happened that I did not see coming, where Becky actually asked me to walk her back to her dorm room. As you can maybe imagine, because of my secret feelings, I was on cloud nine from this. I was beyond excited, but I kept that excitement under control without embarrassing myself or getting myself into serious trouble. That, again, understanding the situation, and particularly where it's night, it's late on a Saturday night. If you're a woman in that situation, it's smart not to be walking back to your dorm room alone at night. That she saw in me somebody who did matter to her as a friend, to keep her safe. I didn't even give one thought to my safety walking back alone after bringing her to her dormitory. I mean, that was the last thing on my mind. All that mattered to me was, wow, I get to walk Becky back to her dorm room. And the beauty of it was that we just talked casually and walked through the night. Nothing happened. I knew I needed to keep my distance. Once we got to her dorm, maybe it was just a quick hug. Good night. Was happy to walk you back. Glad you're back safe. Good night. See you later. I could have very easily gotten carried away. I could have done something morally wrong. I don't have to go there of what that might look like. I knew my limits. I did something of great value to somebody who mattered to me. It was a nice boost for me that at this party, she thought of me to walk her back to her dorm room, perhaps because she knew me well enough to know that she could trust me to walk her back without incident, because there were a whole bunch of other men at this party closer to her age whom she could have asked to walk her back. It seemed to me that maybe most, if not all of them, were drunk, rowdy party types, where it, in retrospect, makes really good sense she asked me to walk her back, where there might be a higher likelihood of something really awful happening to her had she asked one of her college peers to walk her back. This was me at my best. Perhaps in some way that I wasn't aware of, maybe through my body language or my tone of voice, that after the walk back to her dorm room, for reasons that I could actually understand, she started to distance herself from me. And I understood that. In many ways, I was thinking to myself, well, my God, Becky, it's about time that you actually distance yourself from me. Because in all likelihood, I came off somehow showing that I was attracted to you. You can show these things without being aware that you're showing them. That happens a lot with me, with other autistics. We come off in ways that we're not aware. And look, I understood the age difference. I understood this is a senior in college and I'm a high schooler. It's like about time, Becky, that you moved on from me. The only way, in retrospect, that I could really pretty easily come to terms with that and be okay with it, I think, was because of my experience with Danielle. You do the role reversal. I distanced myself from her, I think, for similar reasons, age difference, that having had that experience under my belt, that I was able to make peace and accept, without becoming an emotional wreck, that Becky would do that. Because I did that with somebody younger than me, only maybe 2 years prior. Is when everything went down with Danielle at that summer camp. So this hits on the point where you jump into these experiences, you learn valuable things. You can go into it just for your own personal growth and to learn and to see what happens without expecting a certain outcome. And you never know when what you learn from a given experience could benefit you in some subsequent experience. And so going through what I did with Danielle helped me to understand why I believed Becky distanced herself from me. Because that's what happens. If you have feelings for somebody and they don't share those same feelings, it's understandable and natural, I think, that they will distance themselves from you and move on. And that's what Becky did, and I respected that. And that was that with that. So that was me at my best, because I leveraged what I had learned from a prior experience. I made the right choices. I didn't cross any red lines. I did a really big favor, a good, virtuous favor to somebody who mattered to me. I kept her safe. Nothing happened on the walk back. Nothing happened to me walking back alone after having dropped her off. And I allowed myself to feel for her the way they did, but I was able to keep those feelings under control. Arguably, in retrospect, this was me at my best. Conclusions. Have a goal in mind. Maybe we reach a certain age where understandably the goal is to meet somebody who maybe would be long-term relationship, if not maybe marriage material. That could be a goal. If you're young enough that you don't yet feel that it's time to look for a potential wife, your goal could be to just jump in and see what happens, learn what you can learn, grow from your experiences. You would just want to jump into it being prepared for an outcome you don't want. You want to have that knowledge to protect yourself from getting too hurt. Because as autistics, we can be very, very sensitive people. It helps to go into these experiences understanding, as I write in my book, by the way, that you win sometimes and you lose sometimes. For me, the struggle was I all too often lost with women who I was really interested in, and the women who ended up being interested in me, I didn't feel the same way, and I turned away from them. It's like almost as if what I wanted, I couldn't achieve. That was hard. But I didn't go into these situations with realistic expectations. Those of you who are dating have the opportunity to do that and to know not to do what I did, which led really to a lot of emotional angst. So keep an open mind. Don't be too rigid in your expectations. Whatever happens, happens. You might want to consider disclosing rather than hiding your autism, your neurodivergence early on. A lot of people, I think, would disagree with me on that, where if it's early on in a relationship or in a dating situation, you want to be careful how much you reveal early on. That maybe some things need to wait until you know that person better. But with us being autistic, and by our very nature, kind of in the minority with respect to our neurotype, and at our age, it might be beneficial to disclose who we are early on. And the person we're with might appreciate that, as opposed to weeks or months later. Well, why didn't you tell me that in the first place? Because even if you reveal your autism and that turns off the person you're with, in a way, that's a good thing, because now you part your separate ways. You're not wasting time on somebody who just isn't a fit. You're saving time in that respect, and you're sparing yourself, I think, of even worse heartache, of hiding it and waiting a long time and then disclosing it, and then heaven only knows what the fallout would be from that. So perhaps counterintuitively, as older people who are autistic, I think maybe it would be maybe a good thing to disclose the truth about who we are early on. And maybe the other person admires us for our honesty out of the gate. And if they don't, they don't. That's fine. And you move on from them knowing it wouldn't have been a fit. You move on to the next person. And don't forget, it's easy to caught up in physical attraction, but arguably it's inner beauty that matters most. If I really knew that when I met Danielle that summer in summer camp, in spite of the age difference, that might have been something nice that I didn't get to have because I didn't recognize the importance of inner beauty, of an individual's personality, who they are. Are they kind? Are they good-hearted? Are they good towards you? Are they intelligent? All of those desirable things. If I could go back, I probably would have pursued that and see where it went. So inner beauty matters. It's easy to overlook that, but arguably it's what matters most, I think. Because what a lot of people find is that if they prioritize physical attraction over everything else, I hear a lot of stories from friends and from colleagues and others that the chemistry and the attraction can get old. It can wear over time. That if you're physically attracted to that person, but you're less than attracted to who they are, then down the road you could get into some trouble. So it's really seeing the big picture, in my view, that I think is very important. The big picture. Who that person is. Not just the physical aspect, the chemistry aspect. Arguably, all of it matters, perhaps to different extents with each of us, but it all matters. You want to try to embrace the big picture. And that's all I got on this one.